For the past 20 years, one issue has consistently dominated the political agenda in Quebec. It's not language, it's not even separatism, it's secularism. There's a pattern that keeps repeating itself.
Reaffirm our commitment towards religious neutrality.
Une grande majorité de Québécois qui souhaitent qu'on interdise les signes religieux.
Religion, I don't think should be there.
Politicians portray religion and religious symbols as a threat. They then come up with increasingly restrictive rules to counter that threat, and then an inevitable backlash. And now, it's happening again.
Ce sont surtout les islamistes radicaux qui s'attaquent à ces valeurs avec le plus d'intensité.
We think that the best policy to integrate and to include everyone is to have a school where there's no religion. Religion should be kept in temples.
What you're seeing now is a competition between the two nationalist parties to see who is willing to go furthest in passing illiberal policies to make it more and more difficult for minorities to choose to be different.
The antagonism that the Quebec government is creating within the Muslim population is not healthy at all.
Why does this cycle keep repeating itself? Well, to understand, we have to go back in time. In the 1940s and 50s, the Catholic Church had huge influence in Quebec, running schools and hospitals and dictating a lot of moral standards. In the 60s, Quebecers pushed back with the Quiet Revolution. The government gradually assumed control of health and education, and the Church's influence gradually waned as Quebec modernized. The question of secularism seemed settled, but then a second wave in the battle over secularism in Quebec essentially began on September 11th, 2001. The problem was no longer the Catholic Church. Now it was Islamic extremism. And in the years that followed, there was a kind of frenzy in Quebec. A small town tried to adopt a bizarre code of conduct targeting Muslims, and there were shock headlines about various reasonable accommodations for religious groups. There was a public inquiry, recommendations, and various proposed laws. The one that finally stuck was the CAQ's Bill 21. That law prevents certain civil servants, including judges, prosecutors, police, and teachers, from wearing religious symbols while at work. And while the bill is being challenged before the Supreme Court of Canada, when Bill 21 passed, François Legault said, essentially, the question of secularism in Quebec had been settled, and now we could all move on. Of course, that hasn't happened. The controversy over an elementary school in Montreal reignited the debate. A government investigation found that a group of mostly Muslim teachers had created a toxic work environment at Bedford Elementary School. Among other things, the group dissuaded girls from playing soccer, avoided teaching sex ed, and sometimes prayed or spoke Arabic in class. Now, many note that the school administration was well aware of these problems for years but failed to act. But despite that, the CAQ said new, tougher rules were necessary. The education minister introduced new legislation that would extend the ban on religious symbols to include not just teachers, but all school staff, including lunch and after-school monitors, even volunteers. And that still wasn't enough. Now the Premier says he'll introduce legislation banning prayer anywhere in public. And it's not just the CAQ. The PQ, which leads in the polls and supports most of this stuff, also wants to ban elementary school students from wearing religious symbols. Why is this the issue that never goes away in Quebec? Some say it's connected to that history.
They lived it in the Catholic Church for years, for decades, not to say centuries, and decided that they didn't want it to be brought in through other religious groups.
Others say it's also connected to Quebecers' pride in their own unique identity.
People have to realize that there's a very, very important consensus on this in Quebec, and that Quebec shows again it's a distinct society, as some people would like to continue to coin it.
It's true, Quebec's brand of secularism is different. Perhaps secularism isn't even the right word.
It's no longer about secularism in the way that it's understood by the Supreme Court of Canada and in the rest of Canada, I would argue. I think it's become this much more muscular idea of, in French, laïcité, an English term, which I'm not sure is a word, but laïcité, in Quebec, which I think has a very different flavor and a very different understanding of what's going on.
Laïcité is about more than just separating church and state. It's really about separating religion from the public sphere.
There's this belief or this perception that once you wear your religious symbol as a start, whether it be the hijab, anything, any scarf, cross, kippah, Star of David, anything, you are sending a message and you are somehow indirectly influencing people who are easily influenced.
Some people feel the enthusiasm for secularism or laïcité or whatever you want to call it in Quebec isn't really about protecting Quebecers and Quebec values.
The motivation for Bill 21 was never actually to come to some sort of a societal compromise. The goal was always to get votes.
Secularism can be a political tool with many uses, almost like a political Swiss Army knife.
You can use it as a temperature gauge. You throw it out there, and as soon as any press release comes out, the poll is being done the next day, and because they're seeing what are people saying about this.
Politicians also use secularism to destabilize opponents.
It can really put your opponents on the defensive, because then they have to justify defending policies that may not be that popular.
And of course, talking about secularism can be a great way to distract from other, perhaps more pressing issues.
They tried to address the teacher shortage. They failed, but Bill 21 contributed to that. They've tried to address the cost of living. That hasn't worked. They've tried to address the fact that we're missing doctors and nurses. That hasn't worked out. They've tried to stimulate the economy by attracting foreign investment in key industries. That hasn't worked. What has worked is passing policies to target the rights of minorities.
But for supporters of secularism, the debate really is about much more than just politics.
There's always politics involved when you draft bills and have laws adopted. But in this case, there's a really large consensus on this issue. All parties, have agreed to some extent that the principle of secularism is the principle that should be implemented in Quebec.
The CAQ has traditionally defended Bill 21 and other secularism measures that suspend constitutional rights as simply reflecting the will of the people. But some argue that the whole reason we have a constitution is to protect minorities from laws, even popular ones, that overreach.
Like, what's next? If LGBTQ people become unpopular, are we going to take away their rights? If English-speaking people become unpopular, are we going to take away their rights? If Black people become unpopular, are we going to take away their rights? If immigrants become unpopular, are we going to take away their rights? We have to decide as a society, are our rights worth more than a popularity contest? Clearly, what the government and the PQ are telling us is no.
Some experts say using secularism to score political points has its limits and may even backfire. Measures that reinforce secularism may perform well in the polls, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll win votes. Take the PQ's Charter of Values, a precursor to Bill 21 that proposed banning all civil servants from wearing religious symbols.
If we go back to 2013, 2014, the idea of the Charter of Values was popular with most voters in Quebec, especially among Francophone voters. And yet, when the PQ ran on it, it didn't really work.
The PQ lost that election, and Dallaire says political parties now could learn from that experience.
Those explosive issues, they become very interesting when you want to shake up things, because they have the power to shake up things, but they also have the power to sometimes explode in your hands as well.
Even some who support Bill 21 say there may be limits in pushing secularism.
Maybe Monsieur Legault will lose points on this at this point, because maybe he is going too far when, for example, he wants to press prayers in streets.
Legault has said secularism is a value that unites Quebecers. And while it's true that it unites some Quebecers, it risks alienating others.
It's causing feelings of incertitude in the Muslim community. It's causing feelings of, well, maybe should we leave Quebec and go elsewhere in Canada?
Many Muslim immigrants come to Quebec from Francophone countries, which should make it easier for them to integrate.
We were told that we were equals and that we would be able to contribute to society and benefit from society the same as everybody else. We're turning on the TV, and the people that are supposed to be representing us and our leaders are telling society that we're dangerous and we don't share their values and we need to be controlled and our visibility needs to be hidden and we need to be tucked away.
Some experts even think that by aggressively pushing secularism, Quebec may end up right back where it started before the Quiet Revolution.
You know, the Roman Catholic Church and its dominance in Quebec society was a kind of isolation for Quebec. And what is happening now is a use of laïcité and secularism in that more muscular form in Quebec to create a new isolationism for Quebec.
That is not the way that you build a modern, vibrant French nation in North America. By taking your most educated and Francophone bastion of immigrants and telling them and passing laws that drive them insane.
This debate isn't going away anytime soon. Bill 21 will be argued before the Supreme Court, and the PQ and the CAQ's secularism proposals will be debated during the election campaign next fall.
You know, in France, secularism and the principles it was implemented in 1905, 120 years ago, and it's there is still some debate in France, so yeah, it might continue in Quebec.